Okay, you're probably going to hear my dogs wrestling behind me, just as a heads up. Yes, I'm talking about you too. Let's see. The beasts have wandered off. I just realized how dark it is in here. Turn the light on. Alright, I set that to loop. Okay. Another My wrist is still on the recovery, and since I do have a session of playing with friends tonight, I don't want to strain it too much. Especially with a patch dropping tomorrow. So, more of this. Uh, I expect to get through 2 chapters at most. Uh, I'll let this finish this loop and then we'll go into the book proper. Because okay. Don't mind that. I keep losing track of uh, Sumatra PDF, despite the icon being bright fucking yellow. Actually, I'll just transition now. Anyway, more Eye of the World. I think this might be the chapter set where we find my favorite absolute nobody character who doesn't matter. That sounds completely insane. So I will qualify that with I happen to have a tendency to like absolutely nobody characters who don't go anywhere. So. Okay, now we're gonna switch to something. There we go. Strangers. Or rather, Chapter 2, Strangers. When Rand and Matt carried the first barrels through the common room, Master Alvier was already filling a pair of mugs with best brown ale, his own make, from one of the casks racked against one wall. Scratch, the inn's yellow cat, crouched atop it with his eyes closed and his tail wrapped around his feet. Tam stood in front of a big fireplace of river rock, thumping a long-stemmed pipe full of tobacco from a polished canister the innkeeper always kept on the plain stone mantel. The fireplace stretched half the length of the big square room, with a lintel as high as a man's shoulder, and the crackling blaze on the hearth vanquished the chill outside. At that time of the busy day before festival, Rand expected to find the common room empty except for Bran and his father and the cat, but 4 more members of the village council, including Sen, sat in the high-backed chairs in front of the fire, mugs in hand, and blue-gray pipe smoke wreathing their heads. For once, none of the stone's boards were in use, and all of Brand's books stood idle on the shelf opposite the fireplace. The men did not even talk, peering silently into their ale or tapping pipestones against their teeth in impatience as they waited for Tam and Brand to join them. Worry was not uncommon for the village council these days, not in Edmonds Field, and likely not in Watch Hill or Devon Ride. Or even Tarrant Ferry, though who knew what Tarrant Ferry folk really thought about anything. Only two of the men before the fire, Harald Luhan, the blacksmith, and John Thain, the miller, so much as glanced at the boys as they entered. Master Luhan, though, made it more than a glance. The blacksmith's arms were as big as most men's legs, roped with heavy muscle, and he still wore his long leather apron as if he had hurried to the meeting straight from the forge. His frown took them both in, then he straightened around in his chair deliberately, turning his attention back to an over-studious tamping of his pipe with a thick thumb. Curious, Rand slowed, then barely bit back a yelp as Matt kicked his ankle. His friend nodded insistently towards the doorway at the back of the common room and hurried on without waiting. Limping slightly, Rand followed less quickly. "What was that about?" he demanded as soon as he was in the hall that led to the kitchen. "You almost broke my—" "It's old Luhan," Matt said, peering past Rand's shoulder into the common room. "I think he suspects I was the one who—" He got off abruptly as Mr. Salvier bustled out of the kitchen, the aroma of fresh-baked bread wafting ahead of her. The tray in her hands carried some of the crusty loaves for which she was famous round Edmonds Field, as well as plates of pickles and cheese. The food reminded Rand abruptly that he had only eaten an end of bread before leaving the farm that morning. His stomach gave an embarrassing rumble. A slender woman, with her thick braid of graying hair pulled over one shoulder, Mr. Salvier smiled in motherly fashion that took both of them in. "There is more of this in the kitchen, if you two are hungry, and I never knew boys your age who weren't, or any other age for that matter. If you prefer, I'm baking honey cakes this morning." She was one of the few married women in the area who never tried to play matchmaker with Tam. Toward Rand, her motherliness extended to warm smiles and a quick snack whenever he came by the inn, but she did as much for every young man in the area. If she occasionally looked at him as if she wanted to do more, at least she took it no further than looks, for which he was deeply grateful. Without waiting for a reply, she slipped on into the common room. Immediately there was the sound of chairs scraping on the floor as the men got to their feet, and exclaimings over the smell of the bread. She was easily the best cook in Emmets Field, and not a man for miles around but eagerly leaped at the chance to put his feet under her table. "Honey cakes," Matt said, smacking his lips. "After," Rand told him firmly, "or we'll never get done." A lamp hung over the cellar stairs just beside the kitchen door, and another made a bright pool in the stone-walled room and beneath the inn, banishing all but a little dimness in the furthest corners. Wooden racks along the walls and across the floor held casks of brandy and cider, and larger barrels of ale and wine, some with taps driven in. Many of the wine barrels were marked with chalk in Bran Alvier's hand, giving the year they had been bought, what peddler had brought them, and in which city they had been made. But all of the ale and brandy was the make of Two Rivers Farmers or Bran himself. You can tell when I accidentally read the wrong line. Ugh. Peddlers and even merchants sometimes brought brandy or ale from outside, but it was never as good and cost the earth besides, and nobody ever drank it more than once. "Now," Rand said, as they set their casts in the racks, "what did you do that you have to avoid Master Luhan?" Matt shrugged. "Nothing, really. I told Aiden Alcar and some of his snot-nosed friends, Ewan Fingar and Dag Coplin, that some farmers had seen ghost hounds, breathing fire and running through the woods. They ate it up like clotted cream." "And Master Luhan is mad at you for that," Rand said doubtfully. "Not exactly." Matt paused and shook his head. "You see, I covered two of his dogs with flour, so they were all white. Then I let them loose near Dag's house. How was I to know they'd run straight home? It really isn't my fault. If Mistress Luhan hadn't left the door open, they couldn't have gotten inside. It isn't like I intended to get flour all over her house. He gave a bark of laughter. I hear she chased old Luhan and the dogs, all three, out of the house with the broom. Rand winced and laughed at the same time. If I were you, I'd worry more about Elsbeth Luhan than about the blacksmith. She's almost as strong, and her temper's a lot worse. No matter, though. If you walk fast, maybe he won't notice you. Matt's expression said he did not think Rand was funny. When they went back through the common room, though, there was no need for Matt to hurry. The 6 men had their chairs in a tight knot before the fireplace. With his back to the fire, Tam was speaking with a low voice, and the others were leaning forward to listen, so intent on his words they would likely not have noticed if a flock of sheep had been driven through. Rand wanted to move closer to hear what they were talking about, but Mac plucked out his sleeve and gave him an agonized look. With a sigh, he followed Matt out to the cart. On their return to the hallway, they found a tray by the top of the steps and hot honey cakes filling the hall with their sweet aroma. There were 2 mugs as well, and a pitcher of steaming mulled cider. Despite his own admonition about waiting until later, Rand found himself making the last 2 trips between the cart and cellar while trying to juggle a cask and a piping honey cake. Setting his final cask in the rack, he wiped crumbs from his mouth while Matt was unburdening himself, and then said, "Now for the glee." Feet clattered on the stairs, and Ewan Fingar half fell into the cellar in his pudgy face shining with eagerness to impart his news. "There are strangers in the village." He caught his breath and gave Matt a wry look. "I haven't seen any ghost hounds, but I hear someone flowered Master Luhan's dogs. I hear Mistress Luhan has ideas who to look for, too." The years separating Rand and Matt from Ewan, only 14, were usually more than enough for them to give short thrift to anything he had to say. This time they exchanged one startled glance and both were talking at once. "In the village?" Rand asked. "Not in the woods?" Right on top of him, man added, "Was his cloak black? Could you see his face?" Ewan looked uncertainly from one of them to the other, but spoke quickly when Matt took a threatening step. "Of course I could see his face, and his cloak is green, or maybe gray? It changes. It seems to fade into wherever he's standing. Sometimes you don't see him even when you look right at him, not unless he moves. And hers is blue, like the sky, and 10 times fancier than any feast day clothes I ever saw. She's 10 times prettier than anybody I ever saw, too. She's a high-born lady, like in the story. She must be." "Her?" Rand said. "Who are you talking about?" He stared at Matt, who had put both hands on top of his head and squeezed his eyes shut. "They're the ones I meant to tell you about," Matt muttered, "before you got me off onto—" He cut off, opening his eyes for a sharp glance at Ewan. "They arrived last evening," Matt went on after another moment, "and took rooms here in the inn. I saw them ride in. Their horses ran. I've never saw horses so tall or so sleek. They look like they could run forever. I think he works for her." "In service," Ewan broke in. "They call it being in service in the stories." Matt continued as if Ewan had not spoken. "Anyway, he defers to her, does what she says, only he isn't like a hired man? A soldier, maybe. The way he wears his sword, it's part of him, like his hand or his foot. He makes the merchant's guards look like cur dogs, and her Rand, I never even imagined anyone like her. She's out of a Gleeman story. She's like... He paused to give Ewan a sour look. "Like a highborn lady," he finished with a sigh. "But who are they?" Rand asked. "Except for merchants once a year to buy tobacco and wool, and the peddlers. Outsiders never came into the 2 rivers, or as good as never. Maybe at Tyrone Ferry, but not this far south." Most of the merchants and peddlers had been coming for years, too, so they did not really count as strangers, just outsiders. It was a good 5 years since the last time a real stranger appeared in Emmons Field, and he had been trying to hide from some sort of trouble up in Barrelon that nobody in the village understood. He had not stayed long. "What do they want?" "What do they want?" Matt exclaimed. "I don't care what they want. Strangers, Rand, and strangers like you've never even dreamed of. Think of it." Rand opened his mouth and closed it without speaking. The black-cloaked rider had him as nervous as a cat in a dog run. It just seemed like an awful coincidence. 3 strangers around the village at the same time. 3 of this fellow's cloak that changed colors, never changed to black. Her name is Moraine. Ewan said into the momentary silence. I heard him say it. Moraine, he called her. The Lady Moraine. His name is Lan. The wisdom may not like her, but I do. What makes you think Nynaeve dislikes her? Rand said. She asked the wisdom for directions this morning, and called her child. Rand and Math both whistled softly through their teeth, and Ewan tripped over his tongue in his haste to explain. The Lady Moraine didn't know she was the wisdom. She apologized when she found out she did, and asked him questions about herbs and about who around Emmonsfield just as respectfully as any woman in the village, more so than some. She's always asking questions about how old people are, how long they've lived where they live, and oh, I don't know what all. Anyway, Nynaeve answered like she'd bitten a green sweetberry. Then when the Lady Moraine walked away, Nynaeve stared at her like, well, it wasn't friendly, I can tell you that. Is that all? Rand said. You know Nynaeve's temper. Nynaeve's temper. When Sin Vui called her a child last year, she thumped him on the head with her stick, and he's on the village council and old enough to be her grandfather besides. She flares up at anything and never stays angry past turning around. It's too long for me, Ewan muttered. I don't care who Nynaeve thumps, Matt chortled, as long as it isn't me. This is going to be the best Beltane ever. A gleeman, a lady, who could ask for more? Who needs fireworks? A gleeman? Ewan said, his voice rising sharply. Come on, Rand, Matt went on, ignoring the younger boy. We're done here. Excuse me one moment. I need to break out my sword. Anyway. Where was I? Come on, Rand, Matt went on, ignoring the younger boy. We're done here. You have to see this fellow. He bounded up the stairs, leaving scrambling behind him, calling, Is there really a gleeman, Matt? This isn't like the ghost hounds, is it? Or the frogs? Rand paused long enough to turn down the lamp, then hurried after them. In the common room, Rowan, Hum, and Samel Crawl had joined the others in front of the fire so that the entire village council was there. Bran Alvier spoke now, his normally bluff voice pitched so low that only a rumbling murmur traveled beyond the close-gathered chairs. The mayor emphasized his words by tapping a thick forefinger into the palm of his other hand and eyed each man in turn. They all nodded in agreement with whatever he was saying, though said more reluctantly than the rest. The way the men all but huddled together spoke more plainly than a painted sign. Whatever they were talking about, it was for the village council alone, at least for now. They would not appreciate Rand trying to listen. Reluctantly, he pulled himself away. There were still the gleemen and these strangers. Outside, Belle and the cart were gone, taken away by Huartad, the stableman. Matt and Ewan stood glaring at each other a few paces from the front door of the inn, their cloaks whipping in the wind. For the last time, Matt barked, I am not playing a trick on you. There is a gleeman. Now go away. Rand, will you tell this woolhead I am telling the truth so he'll leave me alone? Pulling his cloak together, Rand stepped forward to support Matt. The words died as the hairs stirred on the back of his neck. He was being watched again. It was far from the feeling the hooded rider had given him, but neither was it pleasant, especially so soon after that encounter. A quick look about the green showed him only what he had seen before. Children playing, people preparing for festival, and no one more than glancing in his direction. The spring pole stood alone now, waiting. Bustle and childish shouts filled the side street. All was as it should be, except he was being watched. Then something led him to turn around, to raise his eyes. On the edge of the inn's tile roof perched a large raven, swaying a little in the gusting wind from the mountains. Its head was cocked to one side, and one beady black eye was focused. On him, he thought. He swallowed, and suddenly anger flickered in him, hot and sharp. Filthy carrion eater, he muttered. I am tired of being stared at. Matt growled, and Rand realized his friend had stepped up beside him was frowning at the raven, too. They exchanged a glance, then as one their hands started for rocks. The two stones flew true, and the raven stepped aside, the stones whistling through the space where it had been. Fluffing its wings once, it cocked its black head again, fixing them with a dead black eye, unafraid, giving no sign that anything had happened. Rand stared at the bird in consternation. Oh, God damn it. There we go. Okay. Did you ever see a raven do that? He asked quietly. Matt shook his head without looking away from the raven. Never. Nor any other bird either. A vile bird, came a woman's voice from behind them, melodious despite echoes of distaste. To be mistrusted in the best of times. With a shrill cry, the raven launched itself into the air so violently that two black feathers drifted down from the roof's edge. Startled, Rand and Matt twisted to follow the bird's swift flight over the green towards the cloud-tipped mountains of mist, tall beyond the westwood, until it dwindled to a speck in the west, then vanished from view. Rand's gaze fell to the woman who had spoken. She, too, had been watching the flight of the raven, but now she turned back, and her eyes met his. He could only stare. This had to be the Lady Moraine, and she was everything Matt knew and had said, everything and more. When he had heard she called the knave child, he had pictured her as old, but she was not. At least, he could not put any age to her at all. At first he thought she was as young as the knave, but the longer he looked, the more he thought she was older than that. There was a maturity about her large dark eyes, a hint of knowing that no one could have gotten young. For an instant he thought those eyes were deep pools about to swallow him up. It was plain why Mountain Eowyn named her a lady from a Gleeman's Tale, too. She held herself with a grace and air of command that made him feel awkward and stumble-footed. She was barely tall enough to come up to his chest, but her presence was such that her height seemed the proper one, and he felt ungainly in his tallness. Altogether, she was like no one he had ever seen before. The wide hood of her cloak framed her face and dark hair, hanging in soft ringlets. He had never seen a grown woman with her hair unbraided. Every girl in the Two Rivers waited eagerly for the woman's circle of her village to say she was old enough to wear a braid. Her clothes were just as strange. Her cloak was sky blue velvet with thick silver embroidery, leaves and vines and flowers all along the edges. Her dress gleamed faintly as she moved, a darker blue than the cloak and slashed with cream. A necklace of heavy gold links hung around her neck, while another gold chain, delicate and fastened to her hair, supported a small, sparkling blue stone in the middle of her forehead. A wide belt of woven gold encircled her waist, and on the second finger of her left hand was a gold ring in the shape of a serpent biting its own tail. He had certainly never seen a ring like that, though he recognized the Great Serpent, an even older symbol for eternity than the Wheel of Time. Fancier than any feast day clothes, Ewan had said, and he was right. No one ever dressed like that in the Two Rivers. Not ever. Good morning, Mistress, Lady Moraine, Rand said. His face grew hot at his tongue fumbling. Good morning, Lady Moraine, Matt echoed somewhat more smoothly, but only a little. She smiled, and Rand found himself wondering if there was anything he might do for her, something that would give him an excuse to stay near her. He knew she was smiling at all of them, but it seemed meant for him alone. It really was just like seeing Gleeman's tail come to life. Matt had a foolish grin on his face. You know my name. Oh, whoops. You know my name, she said, sounding delighted, as if her presence, however brief, would not be the talk of the village for a year. But you must call me Moraine, not Lady. And what are your names? Eowyn leaped forward before either of the others could speak. My name is Eowyn Fingard, my lady. I told them your name. That's how they know. I heard Lan say it, but I wasn't eavesdropping. No one like you has come to Emmons Field before. There's a gleeman in the village for Beltane, too, and tonight's winter night. Will you come to my house? My mother has apple cakes. I shall have to see, she replied, putting a hand on Eowyn's shoulder. Her eyes twinkled with amusement, though she gave no other sign of it. I do not know how well I could compete against Gleeman, Eowyn, but you must all call me Moraine. She looked expectantly at Rand and Matt. I'm Matt from Coffin, Moraine, Matt said. He made a stiff, jerking bow, then went red in the face as he straightened. Rand had been wondering if he should do something of the sort, the way men did stories, but with Matt's example, he merely spoke his name. At least he did not stumble over his own tongue this time. Moraine looked from him to Matt and back again. Rand thought her smile, a bare curve at the corners of her mouth, was now the sort Egwene wore when she had a secret. I may have some small tasks to be done from time to time while I am in Emmons Field, she said. Perhaps you would be willing to assist me. She laughed as their assents tumbled over one another. Here, she said, and Rand was surprised when she pressed a coin into his palm, closing his hand tightly around it with both of hers. There's no need, he began, but she waved aside his protest as she gave Eowyn a coin as well, then pressed Matt's hand around one the same way she had Rand's. Of course there is, she said. You cannot be expected to work for nothing. Consider this a token, and keep it with you, so you will remember that you have agreed to come to me when I ask it. There is a bond between us now. I'll never forget, Eowyn piped up. Later we must talk, she said, and you must tell me all about yourselves. Moraine? Rand asked hesitantly as she turned away. She stopped and looked back over her shoulder, and he had to swallow before going on. Why have you come to Emmons Field? Her expression was unchanged, but suddenly he wished he had not asked, though he could not have said why. He rushed to explain himself anyway. I don't mean to be rude, I'm sorry. It's just that no one comes into the Two Rivers except the merchants and peddlers when the snow isn't too deep to get down from Barrelon. Almost no one. Certainly no one like you, and the merchant guards sometimes say that this is the back end of forever, and I suppose it must seem that way to anyone from outside. I just wondered. Her smile did fade then, slowly, as if something had been recalled to her. For a moment she merely looked at him. I am a student of history, she said at last, a collector of old stories. This place you call the Two Rivers has always interested me. Sometimes I study the stories of what happened here long ago, here and at other places. Stories? Rand said. Whatever happened in the Two Rivers to interest someone what could have happened here? And what else would you call it besides Two Rivers, Matt added. That's what it's always been called. As the wheel of time turns, Moraine said, half to herself and with a distant look in her eyes. Places wear many names. Men wear many names, many faces. Different faces, but always the same man. Yet no one knows the great pattern the wheel weaves, or even the pattern of an age. We can only watch and study and hope. Rand stared at her, unable to say a word, even to ask what she meant. He was not sure she had meant for them to hear. The other two were just tongue-tied, he noticed. Eowyn's mouth hung open. Moraine focused on them again, and all three gave a little shake as if waking up. Later we will talk, she said. None of them said a word. Later. She moved on towards the wagon bridge, appearing to glide over the ground rather than walk, her cloak spreading on either side of her like wings. As she left, a tall man, Rand had not noticed before, moved away from the front of the inn and followed her, one hand resting on the long hilt of a sword. His clothes were a dark grayish green that would have faded into leaf or shadow, and his cloak swirled through shades of gray and green and brown as it shifted in the wind. It almost seemed to disappear at times, that cloak, fading into whatever lay beyond it. His hair was long and gray at the temples, held back from his face by a narrow leather headband. That face was made from stony planes and angles, weathered but unlined despite the gray in his hair. When he moved, Rand could think of nothing but a wolf. In passing the three youths, his gaze ran over them, eyes as cold and blue as a midwinter dawn. It was as if he were weighing them in his mind, and there was no sign in his face of what the scales told him. He quickened his pace until he caught up to Moraine, then slowed to walk by her shoulder, bending to speak to her. Rand let out a breath he had not realized he had been holding. "That was Lan," Eowyn said brutally, as if he, too, had been holding his breath. It had been that kind of look. "I'll bet he's a warder." Don't be a fool," Matt laughed, but it was a shaky laugh. "Warders are just in stories. Anyway, warders have swords and armor covered in golden jewels, and spend all their time up north in the Great Blight fighting evils and Trollocs and such." "He could be a warder," Eowyn insisted. "Did you see any gold or jewels on him?" Matt scoffed. "Do we have Trollocs in the true rivers? We have sheep. I wonder what could have ever happened here to interest someone like her." "Something could have," Rand answered slowly. "They say the inn's been here for 1,000 years, maybe more." 1,000 years of sheep," Matt said. "A silver penny!" Eowyn burst out. "She gave me a whole silver penny. Think, think what I can buy when the peddler comes." Rand opened his hand to look at the coin she had given him and almost dropped it in surprise. He did not recognize the fat silver coin with the raised image of a woman balancing a single flame on her upturned hand. But he had watched while Ran Alvier weighed out the coins merchants brought from a dozen land, and he had an idea of its value. That much silver would buy a good horse anywhere in the two rivers, with some left over. I'm gonna step away, grab some water. Where's my BRB? There it is. Enjoy tunes. is. Okay. Okay. Sorry, got a little distracted because both my parents were home. Had to update them on dog status. Where was I? I'm gonna start right after the good horse line. He looked at Matt and saw the same stunned expression he knew must be on his own face. Tilting his hand so Matt could see the coin, but not Ewan, he raised a questioning eyebrow. Matt nodded, and for a minute they stared at each other in perplexed wonder. What kind of chores does she have? Rand asked finally. I don't know, Matt said firmly, and I don't care. I won't spend it either, even when the peddler comes. With that, he thrust his coin into his coat pocket. Nodding, Rand slowly did the same with his. He was not sure why, but somehow what Matt said seemed right. The coin should not be spent, not when it came from her. He could not think of anything else silver was good for, but... Do you think I should keep mine too? Anguish and indecision painted Eowyn's face. Not unless you want to, Matt said. I think she gave it to you to spend, Rand said. Eowyn looked at his coin, then shook his head and stuffed the silver penny into his pocket. I'll keep it, he said mournfully. There's still the Gleeman, Rand said, and the younger boy brightened. If he ever wakes up, Matt added. Rand, Eowyn asked, is there a Gleeman? You'll see, Rand answered with a laugh. It was clear Eowyn would not believe until he set eyes on the Gleeman. He has to come down sooner or later. Shouting drifted across the wagon bridge, and when Rand looked to see what was causing it, his laughter became wholehearted. A milling crowd of villagers, from gray-haired oldsters to toddlers barely able to walk, escorted a tall wagon toward the bridge, a huge wagon drawn by 8 horses. The outside of its rounded canvas cover hung about with bundles like bunches of grapes. The peddler had come at last. Strangers and a Gleeman. Fireworks and a peddler. It was going to be the best Beltane ever. Looter. Sorry if my mic is slightly off. I realized belatedly, like, this is wide enough to push my mic out of the way. I think that's too far forward. Okay, there. Not a fan of the bendy adjustable headsets for this reason. You can get them more precise, but they can also be knocked out of alignment more easily. The peddler. Clusters of pots clattered and banged as the peddler's wagon rumbled over the heavy timbers of the wagon bridge. Still surrounded by a cloud of villagers and farmers come for festival, the peddler reined his horses to a stop in front of the inn. From every direction, people streamed to swell the numbers around the great wagon, its wheels taller than any of the people with their eyes fastened to the peddler above them on the wagon seat. The man on the wagon was Padan Fane, a pale, skinny fellow with gangly arms and a massive beak of a nose. Fane, always smiling and laughing as if he knew a joke no one else knew, had driven his wagon and team into Emmons Field every spring for as long as Rand could remember. The door of the inn flew open even as the team halted in a jangle of harness, and the village council appeared, led by Master Alvier and Tam. They marched out deliberately, even Senbui, amid all the excited shouting of the others for pins, or lace, or books, or a dozen other things. Reluctantly, the crowd parted to let them to the fore, everyone closing in quickly behind and never stopping their calling to the peddler. Most of all, the villagers called for news. In the eyes of villagers, needles and tea and the like were no more than half the freight in a peddler's wagon. Every bit as important was word of outside, news of the world beyond the 2 rivers. Some peddlers simply told what they knew, throwing out in a heap a pile of rubbish with which they could not be bothered. Others had to have every word dragged out of them, spoken grudgingly with a bad grace. Fane, however, spoke freely, if often teasingly, and spun out the telling, making a show to rival Gleeman. He enjoyed being the center of attention, strutting around like an undersized rooster with every eye on him. It occurred to Rand that Fane might not be best pleased to find a real Gleeman in Emmons Field. The peddler gave the council and villagers alike exactly the same attention as he fussed with tying his reins off just so, which is to say, hardly any attention at all. He nodded casually at no one in particular, he smiled without speaking, and waved absently to people with whom he was particularly friendly, though his friendliness had always been of a peculiarly distant kind, backslapping without ever getting close. The demands for him to speak grew louder, but Fane waited, fiddling with small tasks about the driver's seat for the crowd and the anticipation to reach the size he wanted. The council alone kept silent. They maintained the dignity befitting their position, but increasing clouds of pipe smoke rising above their heads showed the effort of it. Rand and Matt edged into the crowd, getting as close to the wagon as they could. Rand would have stopped halfway, but Matt wriggled through the press, pulling Rand. Did I double up on Rand's? I'm rereading that because I can't remember. Rand would have stopped halfway, but Matt wriggled through the press, pulling Rand behind him until they were right behind the council. I'd been thinking you were going to stay out on the farm through the whole festival, Parent Ibarra shouted at Rand over the clamor. Half a head shorter than Rand, the curly-haired blacksmith's apprentice was so stocky as to seem a man and a half wide, with arms and shoulders thick enough to rival those of Master Luhan himself. He could have easily pushed through the throng, but that was not his way. He picked his path carefully, offering apologies to people who had only half a mind to notice anything but the peddler. He made the apologies anyway and tried not to jostle anyone as he worked through the crowd to Rand and Matt. Imagine it, he said when he finally reached them. Beltane and a peddler, both together. I'll bet there really are fireworks. You don't know the quarter of it. You don't know a quarter of it, Matt laughed. Parent eyed him suspiciously, then looked a question at Rand. It's true, Rand shouted, then gestured at the growing mass of people, all giving voice. Later! I'll explain later! Later, I said! At that moment, Padon Fane stood up on the wagon seat, and the crowd quieted in an instant. Rand's last words exploded into utter silence, catching the peddler with an arm raised dramatically and his mouth open. Everyone turned to stare at Rand. The bony little man on the wagon, prepared to have everyone hang out his first words, gave Rand a sharp, searching look. Rand's face reddened, and he wished he were inside so he did not stand out so clearly. His friend shifted uncomfortably, too. It had only been the year before that Fane had taken notice of them for the first time, acknowledging them as men. Fane did not usually have time for anyone too young to buy a good deal of things off his wagon. Rand hoped he had not been relegated to a child again in the peddler's eyes. With a loud harumph, Fane tugged at his heavy cloak. No, not later, the peddler declaimed, once more throwing up a hand grandly. I'll be telling you now. As he spoke, he made broad gestures, casting his words over the crowd. You are thinking you have had troubles in the Two Rivers, are you? Well, all the world has troubles, from the great light south to the Sea of Storms, from the Earth Ocean in the west to the Aiel Waste in the east, and even beyond. The winter was harsher than you've ever seen before, cold enough to jelly your blood and crack your bones. Ah! Winter was cold and harsh everywhere. In the borderlands, they'd be calling your winter spring, but spring does not come, you say? Wolves have killed your sheep. Perhaps wolves have attacked men. Is that the way of it? Oh, I see what happened. Well now, spring is late everywhere. There are wolves everywhere, all hungry for any flesh they can sink a tooth into, be it sheep or cow or man. But there are things worse than wolves or winter. There are those who would be glad to have only your little troubles. What can be worse than wolves killing sheep and men? Senbui demanded. Others muttered in support. Men killing men. The peddler's reply, in portentous tones, brought shocked murmurs that increased as he went on. "It is war, I mean. There is war in Gildan, war and madness. The snows of the Dalan forest are red with the blood of men. Ravens and the cries of ravens fill the air. Armies march to Gildan. Nations, great houses and great men, send their soldiers to fight. War? War?" Master Alvir's mouth fit awkwardly around the unfamiliar word. No one in the Two Rivers had ever had anything to do with a war. Why are they having a war? Vane grinned, and Rand had the feeling he was mocking the villagers' isolation from the world and their ignorance. The peddler leaned forward as if he were about to impart a secret to the mayor, but his whisper was meant to carry, and did. The standard of the dragon has been raised, and men flock to oppose and support. One long gasp left every throat together. And Rand shivered in spite of himself. "The dragon!" someone moaned. "The Dark One's loose in Gildan." "Not the Dark One," Harald Luhan growled. The dragon's not the Dark One. This is a false dragon, anyway." "Let's hear what Master Fane has to say," the mayor said, but no one would be quieted that easily. People cried out from every side, men and women shouting over one another. "Just as bad as the Dark One. The dragon broke the world, didn't he? He started it. He caused the time of madness. You know the prophecies. When the dragon is reborn, your worst nightmares will seem like your fondest dreams. He's just another false dragon. He must be. What difference does that make? You remember the last false dragon? He started a war too. Thousands died, isn't that right, Fane? He laid siege to Ilion. It's evil times." No one claiming to be the dragon reborn for 20 years, now 3 in the last 5. Evil times. Look at the weather. Rand exchanged looks with Matt and Perrin. Matt's eyes shone with excitement, but Perrin wore a worried frown. Rand could remember every tale he had heard about the men who had named themselves the Dragon Reborn, and if they had all proven themselves false dragons by dying or disappearing without fulfilling any of the prophecies, what they had done was bad enough. Whole nations torn by battle, and cities and towns put to torch. The dead fell like autumn leaves, and refugees clogged the roads like sheep in a pen. So the peddlers said, and the merchants, and no one in the Two Rivers with any sense doubted it. The world would end, so some would say, when the real dragon was born again. "Stop this!" the mayor shouted. "Be quiet. Stop working yourselves to a lather out of your own imaginations. Let Master Fane tell us about this false dragon." The people began to quieten, but Senbui refused to be silent. "Is this a false dragon?" the Thatcher asked sourly. Master Alvir blinked as if taken by surprise, then snapped. "Don't be an old fool, Sen." But Sen had kindled the crown again. "He can't be the dragon reborn. Light help us, he can't be. You old fool, Bowie, you want bad luck, don't you? Be naming the Dark One next. You're taken by the dragon, Sen Bowie, trying to bring us all harm." Sen looked around defiantly, trying to stare down the glowers, and raised his voice. I didn't hear Fane say this was a false dragon. Did you? Use your eyes. Where the crops that should be knee-high are better. Why is it still winter when spring should be here a month?" There were angry shouts for Sen to hold his tongue. I will not be silenced. I will not be silent. I have no liking for this talk either, but I won't hide my head under a basket till a Terran ferryman comes to cut my throat. And I won't dangle on Vane's pleasure, not this time. Speak it out plain, peddler. What have you heard, eh? Is this man a false dragon? If Vane was perturbed by the news he brought, or the upset he had caused, he gave no sign of it. He merely shrugged and laid a skinny finger alongside his nose. As to that now, you can say until it is over and done. He paused with one of his secretive grins, running his eyes over the crowd, as if imagining how they would react and finding it funny. I do know, he said, too casually, that he can wield the one power. The others couldn't, but he can channel. The ground opens beneath his enemy's feet, and strong walls crumble at his shout. Lightning comes when he calls and strikes where he points. That I've heard, and from men I believe. Oh, something I forgot to do was talk about there's some really powerful foreshadowing in these early chapters for later on. I can't go into too much detail because I am a book knower. I have read to the end of the series. But if in like comments or VODs or stream chat or anything like that, do feel free to like pipe up. Cause like I would enjoy chatting about this. A sudden silence fell. Rand looked at his friends. Parents still seemed to be seeing things that he did not like, but Matt still looked excited. Tam, his face only a little less composed than usual, drew the mayor close, but before he could speak, Edwin Fingar burst out. He'll go mad and die. In the story, men who channel the power always go mad, then waste away and die. Only women can touch it. Doesn't he know that? He ducked under a cuff from Master Bowie. Enough of that from you, boy, said and shook a gnarled fist in Edwin's face. Show proper respect and leave this to your elders. Get away with you. Hold steady, son. Hold steady, son. Tam growled. The boy is just curious. There's no need of this foolishness from you. Act your age, Brand added, and for once remember you're a member of the council. Sen's wrinkled face grew darker with every word from Tam and the mayor until it was almost purple. You know what kind of women he's talking about. Stop frowning at me, Luhan, and you too, Craw. This is a decent village and decent folk, and it's bad enough to have Fane here talking about false dragons using the power without this dragon-possessed fool of a boy bringing Aes Sedai into it. Some things just shouldn't be talked about, and I don't care if you be letting that fool Gleeman tell any kind of tale he wants. It isn't right or decent. I never saw or heard or smelled anything that couldn't be talked about, Tam said, but Fane was not finished. The Aes Sedai are already into it, the peddler spoke up. A party of them has ridden south from Tar Valon. Since he can wield the power, none but Aes Sedai can defeat him. For all the battles they fight or deal with him once he's defeated, if he is defeated. Someone in the crowd moaned aloud, and even Tam and Brand exchanged uneasy frowns. Those of villagers clumped together, and some pulled their cloaks tighter around themselves, though the wind had actually lessened. Of course he'll be defeated, someone shouted. They're always beaten in the end, false dragons. He has to be defeated, doesn't he? What if he isn't? Tim had finally managed to speak quietly into the mayor's ear, and Bran, nodding from time to time and ignoring the hubbub around him, waited until he was finished before raising his own voice. All of you listen. Be quiet and listen. The shouting died to a murmur again. This goes beyond mere news from outside. It must be discussed by the village council. Master Fane, if you will join us inside the inn, we have questions to ask. A good mug of hot mulled wine would not go far amiss with me just now, the peddler replied with a chuckle. He jumped down from the wagon, dusted his hand on his coat, and cheerfully righted his cloak. Will you be looking at my horses, if you please? I want to hear what he has to say, more than one voice was raised in protest. You can't take him off. My wife sent me to buy pins. That was Whit Conger. He hunched his shoulders at the stares the others gave him, but he held his ground. We haven't a right to ask questions too, somebody back in the crowd shouted. Be silent! The mayor roared, producing a startled hush. When the council has asked its question, Master Fane will be back to tell you all his news and to sell you his pots and pins. Who? Tad. Stable Master Fane's horses. Tam and Bran moved and on either side of the peddler and the rest of the council gathered behind them. The whole cluster swept into the wine spring inn, firmly shutting the door in the face of those who tried to crowd out after them. Pounding on the door brought only a single shout from the mayor. Go home. People milled about in front of the inn, muttering about what the peddler had said, what it meant, what questions the council was asking, and why they should be allowed to listen and ask questions of their own. Some peered in through the front windows of the inn, and a few even questioned Tad, though it was far from clear what they were supposed to know. The two stolid stablemen just grunted in reply and went on methodically removing the team's harness. One by one, they led Fane's horses away, and, when the last was gone, did not return. Rand ignored the crowd. He took a seat on the edge of the old stone foundation, gathered his cloak around him, and stared at the inn door. Gildon, Tarvalon. The very names were strange and exciting. They were places he knew only from peddlers' news, and tales told by merchants' guards. Aes Sedai and moors and false dragons. Those were the stuff of stories told late at night in front of the fireplace, with one candle making strange shapes on the wall, and the wind howling against the shutters. On the whole, he believed he would rather have blizzards than wolves. Still, it must be different out there beyond the two rivers, like living in the middle of Gleeman's Tale. An adventure. One long adventure. A whole lifetime of it. Slowly the villagers dispersed, still muttering and shaking their heads. Wade Conger paused to stare into the now abandoned wagon, as though he might find another peddler hidden inside. Finally, only a few of the younger folk were left. Matt and Perrin drifted over to where Rand sat. I don't see how the Gleeman can beat this, Matt said excitedly. I wonder if we might get to see this false dragon. Perrin shook his shaggy head. I don't want to see him. Somewhere else, maybe, but not the Two Rivers. Not if it means war. Not if it means Aes Sedai here either, Rand added. Or have you forgotten who caused the breaking? The dragon may have started it, but it was Aes Sedai who actually broke the world. I heard a story once, Matt said slowly, from a bull-buyer's guard. He said the dragon would be reborn in mankind's greatest hour of need and save us all. Well, he was a fool if he believed that, Perrin said firmly, and you were a fool to listen. He did not sound angry. He was slow to anger. But he sometimes got exasperated with Matt's quicksilver fancies, and there was a touch of that in his voice. I suppose, he claimed, we'd all live in a new age of legends afterwards, too. I didn't say I believed it, Matt protested. I just heard it. Nynaeve did too, and I thought she was going to skin me and the guard both. He said, the guard did, that a lot of people do believe, only they're afraid to say so, afraid of the Aes Sedai or the Children of the Light. He wouldn't say any more after Nynaeve lit into us. She told the merchant, and he said it was going to be the guard's last trip with him. A good thing, too, Perrin said. The dragon going to save us? Sounds like a cop won't talk to me. What kind of need would be great enough that we want dragon to save us from it? Rand mused, as we'll ask for help from the Dark One. He didn't say, Matt replied uncomfortably. I didn't mention a new age of legends. He said that the world would be torn apart by the dragon's coming. That would surely save us, Perrin said dryly. Another breaking. Burn me, Matt growled. I'm only telling you what the guard said. Perrin shook his head. I just hope the Aes Sedai and this dragon, false or not, stay where they are. Maybe that way the Two Rivers will be spared. You think they're really dark friends? Matt was frowning thoughtfully. Who? Rand asked. Aes Sedai. Rand glanced at Perrin, who shrugged. The stories, he began slowly, but Matt cut him off. Oh, oops. Misread which he that was. Ambiguous he, strike again. The stories, he began slowly, but Matt cut him off. Not all stories say the serve the Dark One, Rand. Light, Matt, Rand said. They caused the breaking. What more do you want? I suppose... Matt sighed, but in the next moment he was grinning again. Old Billy Conger says they don't exist. I said I. Dark friend says they're just stories. He says he doesn't believe in the Dark One either. Perrin snorted. Copland talk from a Conger. What else can you expect? Old Billy named the Dark One. Bet you didn't know that. Light. Rand breathed. Matt's grin broadened. It was last spring, just before the cutworm got into his fields and no one else's. Right before everyone in his house came down with the yellow eye fever. I heard him do it. He still says he doesn't believe, and whenever I ask him to name the Dark One now, he throws something at me. You are just stupid enough to do that, aren't you, Matchroom Coffin? Danae Valmira stepped into their huddle, the dark braid pulled over her shoulder, almost bristling with anger. Rand scrambled to his feet, slender and barely taller than Matt's shoulder. At the moment, the wisdom seemed taller than any of them, and it did not matter that she was young and pretty. I suspected something of the sort about Billy Conger at the time, but I thought you at least had more sense than to try taunting him to such a thing. Maybe old enough to be married, Matchroom Coffin, but in truth you shouldn't be off your mother's apron strings. Next thing you'll be naming the Dark One yourself. The wisdom, Matt protested, looking as if he would rather be anywhere else than here. It was old Bill, Master Conger, not me. Blood and ashes, Watch your tongue, Matchroom. Give me a moment. Okay, we'll definitely be wrapping up after this chapter. Just got a text. Rand stood up straighter, though her glare was not directed at him. Perrin looked equally abashed. Later, one or another of them would almost certainly complain about being scolded by women not all that much older than themselves. Someone always did after one of Nineve's scoldings, if never in her hearing. But the gap in ages always seemed more than wide enough when face to face with her, especially if she was angry. The stick in her hand was thick at one end and a slender switch at the other, and she was liable to give a flail to anyone she thought was acting the fool. Head or hands or legs, no matter their age or position. The wisdom so held his attention that at first Rand failed to see she was not alone. When he realized his mistake, he was beginning to think about leaving, no matter what Nineve would say or do later. Egwene stood a few faces behind the wisdom, watching intently. Of a height with Nineve and the same dark coloring, she could, at that moment, have been a reflection of Nineve's mood. Arms crossed beneath her breasts, mouth tight with disapproval. The hood of her soft gray cloak shaded her face, and her big brown eyes held no laughter now. If there was any fairness, he thought that being 2 years older than her should give him some advantage, but that was not the way of it. At the best of times, he was never very nimble with his tongue when talking to any of the village girls, not like Perrin. But whenever Egwene gave that intent look with her eyes as wide as they would go, as if every ounce of her attention was on him, he just could not seem to make the words go where he wanted. Perhaps he could get away as soon as the knave finished, but he knew he would not, even if he did not understand why. If you are done staring like a moonstruck lamb, Rand al'Thor, Knave said, perhaps you can tell me why you were talking about something even you three great bull calves ought to have sense enough to keep out of your mouths. Rand gave a start and pulled his eyes away from Egwene. She had grown a disconcerting smile when the wisdom began speaking. Nene's voice was tart, but she had the beginnings of a knowing smile on her face, too, until Matt laughed aloud. The wisdom's smile vanished, and the look she gave Matt cut his laughter off in a strangled croak. Well, Rand, the knave said. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Egwene still smiling. What does she think is so funny? It was natural enough to talk of it, Wisdom, he said hurriedly. The peddler, Padden Fane, Master Fane, brought news of a false dragon Gildan and a war, and I. The council thought it was important enough to talk to him. What else would we be talking about? Denise shook her head. So that's why the peddler's wagon stands abandoned. I heard people rushing to meet it, but I couldn't leave Mr. Give me a moment while I try to parse that. Alien. But I couldn't leave... I heard people rushing to meet it, but I couldn't leave Mistress Alien until her fever broke. Council is questioning the peddler about what's happening in Guild Town, are they? If I know them, they're asking all the wrong questions, not the right ones. It'll take the women's circle to find out anything useful. Settling her cloak firmly on her shoulders, she disappeared into the inn. Egwene did not follow the wisdom. As the inn door closed behind Nynaeve, the younger woman came to stand in front of Rand. The frowns were gone from her face, but her unblinking stare made him uneasy. He looked to his friends, but they moved away, grinning broadly as they abandoned him.
You shouldn't let Matt get you mixed up in his foolishness, Rand,
Egwene said, as solemn as wisdom herself. Then abruptly she giggled.
I haven't seen you look like that since Senbui caught you and Matt up in his apple trees when you were 10.
He shifted his feet and glanced at his friends. They stood not far away, Matt gesturing excitedly as he talked. Will you dance with me tomorrow? That was not what he had meant to say. He did want to dance with her, but at the same time he wanted nothing so little as the uncomfortable way he was sure to feel while he was with her, the way he felt right then. The corners of her mouth perked up a small smile.
In the afternoon, she said. I'll be busy in the morning.
From the others came Perrin's exclamation. A gleeman! Egwene turned toward them, but Rand put a hand on her arm. Busy? How? Despite the chill, she pushed back the hood of her cloak, and with apparent casualness pulled her hair forward over her shoulder. The last time he had seen her, her hair had hung in dark waves below her shoulders, with only a red ribbon keeping it back from her face. Now it was worked into a long braid. He stared at that braid as if it were a viper, then stole a glance at the spring pole, standing alone in the green now, ready for tomorrow. In the morning, unmarried women of marriageable age would dance the pole. He swallowed hard. Somehow, it had never occurred to him that she would reach marriageable age at the same time that he did. Just because someone is old enough to marry, he muttered, doesn't mean they should, not right away.
Of course not. Or ever, for that matter.
Rand blinked. Ever?
A wisdom almost never marries. Nynaeve has been teaching me, you know. She says I have a talent, that I can learn to listen to the wind. Nynaeve says not all wisdoms can, even if they say they do.
Wisdom, he hooted. He failed to notice the dangerous glint in her eye. Nynaeve will be wisdom here for another 50 years at least, probably more. Are you going to spend the rest of your life as her apprentice?
There are other villages, she replied heatedly. Nynaeve says the villages north of Taryn always choose a wisdom from away. They think it stops her from having favorites among the village folk.
His amusement melted as fast as it had come. Outside the two rivers? I'd never see you again.
And wouldn't you like that? You have not given any sign lately that you'd care one way or another.
No one ever leaves the two rivers, he went on. Maybe someone from Taryn Ferry, but they're all strange anyway. Hardly like two rivers folk at all. Egwene gave an exasperated sigh.
Well, maybe I'm strange too. Maybe I want to see some of the places I hear about in the stories. Have you ever thought of that?
Of course I have. I daydream sometimes, but I know the difference between daydreams and what's real.
And I do not,
she said furiously, and promptly turned her back on him. That wasn't what I meant. I was talking about me. Egwene? She jerked her cloak around her, a wall to shut him off, and stiffly walked a few paces away. He rubbed his head in frustration. How to explain? It was not the first time she had squeezed meanings from his words that he never knew were in them. In her present mood, a misstep would only make matters worse, and he was fairly sure that anything he said would be a misstep. Matt and Perrin came back then. Egwene ignored their coming. They looked at her hesitantly, then crowded close to Rand. Lorraine gave Perrin a coin too, Matt said. Just like ours. He paused before adding. And he saw the writer. Where? Rand demanded. When? Did anyone else see him? Did you tell anyone? Perrin raised broad hands in a swelling gesture. One question at a time. I saw him at the edge of the village, watching the smithy just at twilight yesterday. Gave me the shivers, he did. I told Master Luhan, only nobody was there when he looked. He said I was seeing shadows. But he carried his biggest hammer around with him while we were banking the forge fire and putting the tools up. He's never done that before. So he believed you, Rand said, but Perrin shrugged. I don't know. I asked him why he was carrying the hammer or if all I saw was shadows, and he said something about wolves getting bold enough to come to the village. Come into the village. Maybe he thought that's what I saw, but he ought to know I can tell the difference between a wolf and a man on horseback, even at dusk. I know what I saw, and nobody's going to make me believe different. I believe you, Rand said. Remember, I saw him too. Perrin gave a satisfied grunt, as if he had not been sure of that.
What are you talking about?
Egwene demanded suddenly. Rand suddenly wished she had spoken more quietly. He would have if she had realized she was listening. Matt and Perrin, grinning like fools, fell all over themselves telling her of their encounters with the black-cloaked rider, but Rand kept silent. He was sure he knew what she would say when they were done.
Egwene was right.
I'm sorry.
Nynaeve was right,
Egwene announced to the sky when the two youths fell silent.
None of you is ready to be off leading strings. People do ride horses, you know. That doesn't make them monsters out of a gleeman's tail.
Rand nodded to himself. It was just as she had thought. She rounded on him.
And you've been spreading these tales. Sometimes you have no sense, Rand al'Thor. The winter has been frightening enough without you going about scaring the children.
Rand gave a sour grimace. I haven't spread anything, Egwene, but I saw what I saw, and it was no farmer out looking for a strayed cow. Egwene drew a deep breath and opened her mouth, but whatever she was going to say vanished as the door of the inn opened, and a man with shaggy white hair came hurrying out as if pursued. I must pause now. I'm slowly getting more used to the yapping, but still a strain in my throat. Especially since I am doing voices to some extent. I'm certain I forgot which voices I was how I was doing certain voices and which ones I was doing just because of time. But, yes. I misremembered how slow this opening is. Not in a bad way. I think that it establishes a lot. It has to do a ton of world building groundwork. Like, I do not envy the task of what it's doing, and I think it does it pretty well. I just happen to misremember when things happen, which is why I'm trying to take a no spoilers policy. Because otherwise I will accidentally spoil things that happen like 10 chapters in the future. Like a New Spring, which I don't plan on reading any book past Eye of the World unless people really, really want me to. Like, people would have to really show up for this by the end of the book for me to think that, okay, maybe I should pick up the Great Hunt. But, like, for New Spring, I thought that something that happened, like, very close at the end of the book happened closer to the middle. Because I had just compressed most of the middle to a few chapters. Which this isn't unique to the Wheel of Time at all. In other stories, I also have a bit of trouble remembering order of events. Like, I was discussing the Shadowbringers base story with someone, and I mentioned something because I thought they were very close to seeing it. And it turned out that no, that was something from much, much later in the story, and I had accidentally dropped info that they didn't have access to yet.
That kind of thing. Anyway, we are also beginning. Oh, sorry about that. We are also beginning to see the start of a running joke, which will not come to fruition, I think, within this book. I think it takes a couple books for it to really build up steam as a series-wide running joke. I will not spoil what it is. It's just very good, and I didn't realize that it happened this early. I thought definitely not the Fellowship had broken up by the time it started. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Please do comment with thoughts and stuff. If I remember to check YouTube, I will bring those up during the preview, not the preview, the opening before I really get going. And words. I'm sorry, I once again forgotten what I was saying. God, I wish I had store-bought neurotransmitters. the Right. If you leave a comment on like the VOD, I will try to I'll try to remember to check to see like if people are making comments, and then before I start the next reading, I will talk about stuff like mention like, hey, I think this is a good theory for where we are, or even just like, hey, this I don't think what I'm about to say is likely because we are so early, or hey, this theory isn't possible because of XYZ we've already learned. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.